Hey guys, Dave here. Today is the third and final installment on how to rebuild a YZ450F motor. But before we get into the video, if you wouldn't mind, consider liking and subscribing to the channel below and leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Now with that out of the way, let's jump into the video. While we clean up the case halves, I'm going to throw the new bearings. These are the new main bearings. I'm going to throw these in the freezer. Let these get nice and cold while we clean this up.
Look at these beefy boys. Alright, we'll go and throw these in the freezer.
Alright, so before we get to cleaning, we are going to go and pop this main bearing out. So it's got a couple of Torx bolts on it. Looks like they're going to be T40. We're going to back these two retaining clips off, flip this over, and whack this bearing with a socket, knock that out of place. When you're holding the engine case, careful of these edges here. You can slice your finger. I got myself pretty good a couple times yesterday. Alright, so we're going to hit this bearing with a little bit of heat. This guy over. 32mm socket, mallet, and get that all centered and just alright. It's the old one.
Alright, so that guy's out. Just wipe some of the old oil out of here. Get as much as we can with just a regular paper towel.
Alright, so I'm plugging away at cleaning this out. I'm using a little bit of brake cleaner on a rag, cleaning up these mating surfaces. Because when we go to put this back together, we're going to put a thin layer of liquid gasket on here. But we want to make sure we have a totally clean mating surface. So a little bit of brake cleaner, take some of that off. Compressed air in and around here. I'm not too concerned about these bearings because I'm going to just fill them up with assembly lube to kind of get some more lubrication back in there. And once I've got this totally spick and span, the main bearings will be cold enough that we can heat this and drop them into place. Alright, so this half the case is 90% done. We're going to put this aside and take the main bearing out of the other half and kind of clean this up a bit. This is going to be a little more intricate because it's got the transmission still in it. And then we're going to clean the worktop, put a new piece of cardboard down instead of this towel, so we'll have a totally clean surface to work on. Then we can do the final 10% cleaning and work at reassembling.
This guy down here. I don't want to take out this transmission. I don't want to have to worry about putting it back together, but we've got to knock this bearing out.
Well, futzing around with this, transmission just slid out. Flip this back over. Oh, you son of a gun. Son of a gun. I just didn't want to have to deal with the transmission. Alright, so we've got the two case halves pretty well cleaned up. We're about 90% of the way there. So what we're going to do is we're going to totally clean this bench, put all the tools away, wipe it down, make it nice and spick and span, and then we're going to put fresh cardboard down. But we want to make sure from here on out everything is as clean as possible. We don't want any we're not going to sweep the floor, we're not going to use the compressed air. After we blow everything dry, we're going to let everything settle. Because at this point, we can't have any foreign bodies inside the motor because that could cause a lot of trouble. So we're just going to work on being as clean as possible right now and from here on out. Alright, so we're going to try to do this without touching a hammer. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat up the case, then we're going to grab the bearing and drop it into place. And the bearing should have contracted enough in the freezer, and the heat should have expanded the metal in the case that the bearing will literally just plop right into place. Grab the bearing. Well, we couldn't get it to drop in, but it did go in. So, but we did have to coax it with a little bit of muscle. But that bearing is in, so we'll swap this side out and we'll drop the bearing in the other side. All right, so both crank bearings are in. The first one we had to tap into place. The second one just plopped in. So that was really cool. We're gonna look up the torque specs for these two retaining clips. For either side, and we'll throw a little Loctite on those, torque those to spec. To offer a little bit more protection, it calls for you to dimple this screw head right there. That way with the Loctite and with that dimple, this screw won't come undone. If it did, it would cause a tremendous amount of trouble inside the motor. So we're going to take our punch. We're going to put it right on the edge there and give it a solid whack. Alright, that's good. This one's already pretty darn close. Good. Transmission is back. Okay. Oh my God, well, a couple hours later, we've got the transmission installed. I can run the gears like this and rotate the shift drum and it'll click through all the gears. So we'll put a little lubricant on there and move on to the next step. Okay, so in order to prevent the transmission from being knocked out this way when the case is sitting, I'm gonna just temporarily put the sprocket on. Alright, so now, finally, you can see how a crankshaft is supposed to function with the connecting rod. It's supposed to be able to spin freely like that. Compare that to our old one, which is just stuck. Alright, that's almost 300 degrees, so just crank down through here. Boom! We're not in business. Now we're in business. That was a close one. I gotta make sure that the connecting rod is actually where it's supposed to be. Alright, that is awesome news. It worked. Okay, so we got the crank in the case. We're just going to put a little bit of liquid gasket on and we're gonna actually make these two halves. Alright, so I don't know if you can hear the storm going on outside, but there's a storm out there. Alright, so we're gonna apply just a really, really thin coat of this stuff. We don't want to do too much because as we torque it to spec, it can squeeze out inside the motor and it could gum up coolant passageways or oil passageways, and that could lead to a lot of damage. So now what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully start sliding them together. Bottom dead center. Flip this.
That's set in place.
We are 99% there. You can see here I'm reinstalling the bolts and torquing them to spec. And this is the final step in bringing the two case halves together. Here I'm installing the counterbalance and primary drive gears, torquing everything down. And the counterweight on the other side of the counterbalance or shaft. There's the oil pump assembly, getting that installed. And this is the spring-loaded mechanism for the shift assembly. Using plenty of lubricant on the gears while I install the clutch basket and the inner hub. I'm reusing these clutch plates, so they're already soaked in oil, but I just put a little bit extra on there. Torquing down the clutch springs, and now installing the cam chain and the cam chain guide. Installing the flywheel. I'm sorry, I've got to break this up into 4 parts instead of 3. I've just shot way too much footage. I can't condense it all into one final part. So check back on Friday for part 4.